Hello, I'm Mark Stewart and welcome back to Stu Structures. We're here to continue our tower build today, so stay tuned. Okay, so in this segment I would like to show you with this Grafton D Tower from West Virginia on the B&O Railroad how I got the base of this building to this point. In the last video we showed you the roof and me finishing up some shingles and stuff, but I had this previously built before I started this series, so I wanted to go over because this has some neat techniques and stuff involved in the making of this. I mean, I feel like sometimes I'm preaching to the choir because I know a lot of you guys out there know probably more about this than I do. But I was asked to show some of this, so I'm going on with it. I know there's a lot of people out there that are new and want to do prototypical buildings and don't know where to go. So we're going to go more into this build, and I'll show you what I went through in this process to get the building to the point that we are right now. But I also wanted to show one other thing that I mentioned in the last video because I had some questions as far as the Sanborn insurance maps. At the turn of the 18 to 1900 century mark, a lot of the railroads, well, an independent insurance company actually was doing surveys of major towns, and a lot of these included railroads. And in these there was a study done of all the buildings and the railroads, but it's actually a 50 foot to 1 inch scale map of everything in the towns. And Grafton had some of these as well, and here's just an example of one of those.
I have put in a couple of shots here of different corners of Sanborn maps. Both of these are of Grafton, West Virginia. This first one is a shot of the Beanery, or the original hotel that was in Grafton. This was here prior to the Civil War, about early 1850s. I do have a lot of pictures of these, but I didn't have an actual blueprint or anything like that to go by. So this gives me a dimensional drawing of the footprint to start from. As you can see, it's in the middle of a Y of two major main lines. So it also gives me a position and kind of gives me an idea of what the platforms may have been like. But from this I could either go to an engineering place that does blueprints and have it enlarged to scale. I did take a couple of photographs and enlarge them up to the point that I could see brickwork and doors and kind of get an idea of the scale of the building. But it's really hard to do early buildings like that because the bricks were different sizes. They weren't standard the way they are today. Some doors were up to 4 feet wide, so you can only get kind of a guesstimation and a close approximation of what you're doing. The second shot I've got here, while we're not sure really which industries we're going to do in the area, I kind of like this one. I'm going to recommend that maybe we do this one. I don't have a whole lot of really good photographs of this either. But this was a lumber warehouse and processing plant, and they actually had a factory here where they made wood products as well. But it was on the other side of the river from the roundhouse, and it actually had a ramp that came up out of the river where they would float logs down river to this facility and then take them into the facility and do what they had to do. So it's a really interesting structure, but without pictures, here again is another good example of where I would go to find footprints of the buildings and sizes and dimensions of the property and that kind of thing to work from. So Sanborn maps are really a very good resource for a lot of projects you may be looking to do.
So as you can see, the Sanborn maps really are a very good tool for some buildings and a good way to get a footprint for the buildings you're working on. I was just informed this last week too that the Library of Congress has been digitizing all of their Sanborn maps, and they'll be available online. A lot of them already are. I'm not sure how many or what or how easily search their database is, but it'd be a good source. Most universities and other people that have these maps charge you to copy them. So through the Library of Congress you may be able to get digital copies for free, which would be good. So now we're going to continue on with the build of this D-tower. a lot of this was done previous to me starting this series, so I want to show you what I did to get to the point that the building is now. There's several things from the ground up that we'll go over, and some techniques that I use, and we'll go more into that at this point.
So through the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad Historical Society, when I worked there, I was able to get a blueprint for this building. This had been taken by somebody in the society and actually enlarged to actual 1/87th scale, so this drawing was even to scale. But it does give all the dimensions, so if you had to take a scale rule and draw everything out on paper to get your dimensions, you still would be able to do that. It just made it one step easier for me to do that. So that was a very nice find there. So the first thing I did to start this building was give it a good foundation. The wall is a real thin styrene sheet that resembles 3D brickwork, but it's real thin, and I wanted it to have some good stability at the bottom, so I may have went a little oversized with this, but basically it's got balsa wood, and you can see it's a fair sized timber on the bottom. I like wood sometimes, for depending on the situation, for giving a concrete look. If you rough it up and sand all the joints and texture just a little bit, it really gives a fair representation of concrete. I added this little stoop at the end with a separate piece of concrete, or a balsa wood to represent concrete stoop where the door goes into the building. Also, the foundation has two basement windows. Since the wood was so thick, what I did was just draw the area where the window would be placed on the wood, and I just chiseled out the areas back about halfway through the wood where the basement windows were. Since there's not actually going to be a basement under this window or nothing lit inside it in the basement, I wasn't worried about being able to see through the window. So I went about halfway back through the wood and then blackened it out with paint. And then what I'll do is put a piece of clear plastic on that, and then some mullions over top of it, so that it'll have the appearance of a basement window without actually seeing clear through, and then I won't have to do any blocks behind it for a view block either, which, being a basement, I really probably wouldn't have needed to, but it solves that whole problem anyway. The next step was the whole first floor and the brickwork. I took the drawings, and you can also obviously see here there's some columns and the window panels set back in the wall, and I wanted to give it a good 3D look. I didn't want it to be flat like paper or something, and the brick has nice texture to it on the panels the way they're made. So what I did was go ahead and cut all the panels and recess them, and add the brick ledges in using different layers of plastic. The windows I cut mullions for and just glued them on glass. They're not the best looking thing in the world. Probably should have just went ahead and bought some windows from Grantline or TG or somebody to do this with, but this is a background building, so I wasn't really that concerned with the windows in these. They're a little rough, but from a distance they look fine, so I just framed them in wood, put a wood windowsill on to basically represent the concrete, and put all that together. I scratch built the door just out of a panel and some wood strips to represent the door that went in the end as well, and basically that's about the first floor. Underneath the overhang here on the front of the building, there are supports, which some beams that support the floor up above, and they're trimmed out in small wood. I don't know if you can really see it very well in either one of these two shots here. But basically I just took the beams and cut 45s on the base of them, left enough room that I could just run basically kind of a square wood 2x2 stock to trim the whole thing in flat against the building, as well as each of the beams individually to just frame the whole area. It adds a nice little detail, although you're not going to see it very well, but it was on the actual building, so we put that in there as well. To start the second floor on this, there was really a stone ledge around all the brick that the whole windows and the units set on the second floor. The wood that just sticks out on the front of the building didn't have that stone ledge, but the whole brick area did for the two sides and the rear of the building. So I put a nice piece of balsa on there to create the window ledges, and then trimmed out underneath of it with a 2-piece brick layer to add a little mullion that kind of goes, well, not a mullion, but a brick ledge that topped the wall where it met the stone structure there. The end walls and the corners, you can see, have brick sheets. I basically just scratch built this all from balsa wood. I just stick built it basically. It was just a slow process, but I figured out the measurements for the number of windows I had for the space I had, looked at the drawing, measured it out to scale, and cut all the lumber to the sizes I needed, and just basically built it flat on a surface, and then added the whole unit onto the building as a single piece. Then the corners, I came back and glued the brickwork on top of the basswood in the corners to represent the brick. And then on the very top, there's also another piece of wood trim that wraps around the entire top of the wall where the roof comes down and meets it. On the face of the structure, there's a couple of pieces of wood here that I'm going to add on at the end of the building that gives trim to the overhang on the front of the building, makes it look a little bit better. But the upper parts of the windows here are blocked off, so I've got cardstock on the insides of those that I'm going to use to do the blocking off of that. The windows will get a small tiny plastic piece of trim all the way around them. The windows are just big single panes. They don't have mullions, but there is this break in the middle that separates the glass from the closed off area at the top of the window. So there's a board that I put in there all the way around for that as well. But the front and back are basically treated about the same. It was just a lot of time consuming effort to go in here and do this. It really wasn't hard, but a lot of pieces of wood went into this. Since I had to put the floor in here, I did go ahead and start a little bit of the interior. I didn't want to have to scribe the floorboards after I put it in, so before I had mounted the floor or the ceiling for the first floor and the floor for the second floor, I went ahead and took an X-Acto blade and measured out floorboards and turned it on the back side and just scribed all the joints for the floorboards. I didn't put cross cuts in any of the boards, so they're all one-piece boards clear across the floor at this point. I don't think it's going to be that visible, so I'm not going to add the little nail holes at the ends of the boards and all the ends of the boards and all that. You do see the little circle hole cut in one end. The second picture coming up here will explain that. There is a circular staircase that came in from the ground floor to the second floor, and that was the access for this floor. So I am going to put that in there because it would have shown through the windows, and I've got to cut this little triangle out. I had cut the start of the stairs backwards at the top, so I've got to cut this little triangle off because that would actually be the flat end where the stairs start on that side and go down from there. But it's a good start. I'm going to use cardboard and do beadboard. There would have been beadboard around the base of the walls on the first floor up to the windowsill, and then it was just flat board above that, so it'll all just be cardstock or something to cover the inside and then painted. It would have been kind of a lime green back in the early days, so we'll probably do that hospital green in there like they were. I've started finding some of the interiors for the building, a little desk. I think we're going to go ahead and put the lever action and all that in here because the time period we model, the switches and everything would have been controlled manually from this tower at that time. So we're going to add all that in there. I'm trying to find some better shots that give me some of that older detail. Most of the interior shots I have are past that point. So looking for a little more information for the interior, but basically that's the way the building is and at this point and how it stands. So we'll continue on with this in our next build, in the next video.
So that brings us kind of where we are at this point with this building. Some of the other things, I used basically just basic paints for this. The concrete colors, I just mix a white and black and use a little bit of brown in it to give it a warmth, very, very little black. but the brown gives it more of a kind of a concrete color because of the sand that was used in concretes gives it that tone. This is a little more gray than I would probably like, so I may end up, when I come back and do some weathering, adjust that color a little bit. The brickwork is all done with these real thin sheets, so you can see they're extremely thin and pliable. I used the brick. I know a lot of people just put a real light wash into the mortar joints and then wipe the face off. I do it slightly different. I have seen some other people do it, but I do put the mortar in my joints first with a real light wash type of compound and build it up maybe a couple of layers to give me enough good color in the joints. But then I take the closed foam cell makeup foam pads, and I take an acrylic paint to the color of the brick that I want to use, and I dab the pad in there and then knock most of the paint off, and then just lightly come back and touch the surface of the brick. If you push too hard, it goes down into where the mortar joints are too. You can come back later with a dental pick or something and scribe some of that out if you do get it down into the joints. But I like this technique because it doesn't give you that misted over white filmy type of look to the brick. It actually really defines good color to the brick separate from the mortar joints. And also, you don't actually get a perfect applying of pressure every time you use that pad. So the bricks, as even in normal brickwork, some are going to be just a little darker than others, so it gives you the appearance that, you know, there's some variation in it, the way all natural brickwork really is. So I really like that. But basically it's all just acrylics. White obviously for the trim. Everything else is just basic. I did use some black wash on the shingles. I'll come back and do some more weathering and stuff with that later on. I am going to add a little light into this as well and a few other things. But basically it's going to turn out to be a nice structure. We've got a little more work to do on it, and we'll continue that in our next video. So thank you for stopping by. I appreciate you coming by and enjoying spending time with me. Thanks. So with all that said, I appreciate you coming by, like I said, but also down at the bottom you'll see a subscribe button. Go ahead and push that. It's free. There's a lot of these sites out there, but there's a lot of good information coming your way. So if you subscribe, hit the little bell there as well, and you'll be notified when the next one comes out. And you'll be able to get first dibs on viewing that one as well. It's all good. I would like to give a really good shout out to the B&O Historical Society. The blueprint you saw earlier and a lot of the pictures and stuff I used did come from them. In my previous video I said everybody ought to be supporting the Railroad Historical Society of the railroad they're modeling. I'm gonna kind of harp on that through some of these videos. It's amazing what they can do for you, so give them some support. But I appreciate you coming by. Hit the subscribe button, and we'll see you again here shortly with the next video. Thank you.